Hello everybody and welcome back to the DIY Semi channel. Today we're going to do something a little bit different here. We're going to do a deep dive into oil analysis. It's not exactly a glamorous topic, but it is critically important if you own a truck or really any piece of heavy equipment and you want to, head off any potential catastrophic failures before they occur. It's important, it's inexpensive, and a little bit of knowledge here, you can be as good or better at interpreting this than a dealer is. Before we get started here, it would really help me out if you smash that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. I work hard here to bring you valuable information every week, and I have some new things planned here and eager to share it with you to make you a really more well-rounded business owner and owner-operator. So what we're going to talk about here is we'll talk about wear metals, contaminants, additives, multi-source metals, and the fluid properties of your oil. We have 3 different samples we're going to go through. The first 2 are mine, and they're just 2 samples from different sample providers. And then on the third one, we have an oil sample of a truck that has some issues. And we're kind of going to go through a little bit on how to interpret that and pinpoint issues. And if you learn this information, you're going to be well armed and be your own best advocate when it comes time to put your truck in the shop. So stay tuned, and hopefully you're really going to learn some stuff here. Inside the computer, we got 3 different samples we're going to look at today, so I can show you the difference between different samples, what they all include and don't, and then you can see they measure things slightly different. And also I have one here we're going to really analyze here where the truck definitely had some problems, so we'll look at that and show you kind of the science behind it. So we'll start here with this sample. We're just going to eliminate the top here where it has some personal information. Start here with iron. Okay, first category here we're looking at is wear metals. Right there you'll see. Okay, so we have 3 different samples here, 1, 2, 3, 3 being the most current. So you can see where I've had some different issues here with things. We'll talk about that as we go. But like I said, we'll start here with iron. Iron is a wear metal. It's going to be cam, crankshaft, bearings, cylinders, cylinder liners, gears such as in your bull gear or whatever, and then rings. It could be rocker arms, valve train. So it's really it could be a lot of different areas. That's where you have to kind of piece this together here in interpretation. Chromium right here. Okay, chromium would be possible piston rings, liners, piston, cylinder liners, and valves, valve train. Okay, then we have I'm still learning how to use this here. We have nickel. Sorry, I'm not very good at that. Nickel is in camshaft and crank bush bearings. It's also in some parts of your valve train. Aluminum. There is aluminum in your pistons, turbo bearings, and main bearings, as well as possibly it's an overlayment metal, which means it would overlay over the top of another metal, such as in a bearing. So you would start to show elevated overlayment metal wear before you would get into the like the iron or the lead typically. So copper. Okay, here's where it can get complicated. Copper is an overlayment metal, which means it overlays on a bearing. Also, you'll find copper in oil coolers. Okay, so if you show elevated copper all by itself, I'm not talking about normal levels of copper like here, these are all normal, but if you showed elevated copper by itself, I would turn to oil cooler. Okay, but when you have it like here, right there, you have elevated copper along with some overlayment in a bearing here. So I would look more towards a bearing. Copper would be like a turbo bearing, main bearings, uh, possibly rod bearings, stuff like that. So this gets a little complicated right there. With lead, you're talking main and rod bearings typically. Tin, another overlayment. Journal bearings. There's lead. There's tin and solder. I don't know where the hell you would get solder inside a motor, but it's in there. Cadmium, we don't need to worry about. Well, actually, cadmium and vanadium, we don't need to worry about either one of those because there shouldn't be any in your motor, as far as I know. Vanadium is, there's vanadium in some of these heavier fuels that would use in different industries, but not in trucking. So, silver, that one I had to look up. Silver, I didn't know. There's silver in wrist pins, some of your gear teeth, you know, like in the front of your motor, you know, where you have all your drive gears, and some of the bearings also have a small amount of silver. Like I said, we can skip vanadium. Now we're here into contaminants. Come on. Screw it. Silicon. Silicon, but not silicone. It is not silicone. That's something different. Silicon is typically dust or dirt, which would come in through your air filter. Okay? So, you say, oh, I change my air filter once a year, good enough, or oh, I wait till the filter minder is going up. Well, if you oil sample, you might find that you need to be changing or cleaning your air filters sooner because you got dirt intrusion through it. Okay, so I made a video about air filters. I know it's not an exciting topic. I'll put a link somewhere up in the top here for you. You can watch that. I'll put a link at the end of the video also for you. But silicon, you know, that's dirt. It causes wear. It's a solid particle. You don't want that. So definitely keep an eye on that. Sodium is additive in coolant, as is potassium. Okay, you will always have, oil has a very small trace amount of sodium in it naturally. Should not have potassium, but you always have very small amounts of sodium, potassium. It's just the way it is. This is not a problem. It's perfectly normal. Elevated levels, you'd be looking at, you know, a head gasket, possibly a cracked head, but you're definitely having antifreeze coolant intrusion into the oil. That's not good. That can cause, you know, excessive wear. It makes the oil acid, which can, you know, cause corrosion, eat your bearings. You know, if you have coolant in your oil and the truck's sitting there just doing nothing, you know, some of your bearings are just sitting there soaking in it, and it's just going to eat them up. So if you got a problem with elevated sodium, potassium, that's something you don't want to let slide, and you won't know about that. Some people say, well, I'll know because my oil will turn milky. You can have significant coolant intrusion before your oil turns white, so you need to know about it. These multi-source metals, okay, they can be in the oil, they can be from an additive you use, they can be, you know, come from inside your motor a little bit. So titanium, there's a small amount of titanium in your compressor and in some bearings. Okay. Also, I believe it's Kendall makes an oil where they advertise they have titanium in it. Does that show up in a sample? I don't know. I've never used it. So if you use it, drop me a comment below. Let me know. I'd really like to know. Moly, or molybdenum, some people call it moly. Okay. That is there's a small amount of moly in your piston rings, okay, and it's also put in the oil for a pressure additive to keep the oil performing under pressure. And some of your aftermarket additives advertise they have a lot of moly in them. I myself would not use that. Moly is a solid particle, and you do not want solid particles in your motor. They cause wear. Okay, that's my personal opinion. You do as you please. Antimony. I definitely had to look that one up. I don't know what the hell antimony was from, but let me find my notes here. Antimony, apparently there's a small amount of antimony in bearings, okay? And grease contains a small amount of antimony also. Manganese, not to be confused with magnesium. Manganese is present in steel. So anywhere you have steel, like your valve train has some steel in it, okay? I believe your camshaft has a small amount of steel also, but manganese is definitely like a steel alloy. So I've never had a problem with manganese in any of my samples. Okay, lithium. Lithium is an additive in grease, so you shouldn't have any lithium in your oil. That's more of a grease additive. Okay, boron is an anti-corrosion additive. It's in your oil. Also, excessive boron. I mean, if you have high, like silicon, if you got a lot of dust in your oil, that can possibly cause your boron to go up. But you know, if the standard amount, these numbers right here, 20 in the 20s and 30s, that's just from your oil. So if you have elevated boron and you have not switched, brands of oil, you know, check your silicon numbers, see if they're elevated. These numbers here are not high, but I don't like them that high. These 7s and 8s. I like to stay more in the 3 to 5 number. So maybe I need to do a air filter service more often. Magnesium and calcium are both in your oil as detergents. So you want to keep this strong. If you see it starting to get depleted, like well, here I had changed like 1066 and then 555, 518. I had changed oils, so you'll notice different numbers with different oils. So this first one here definitely has a strong additive package. We really like that. But see, then it lacks calcium, whereas these other two had weak magnesium, much stronger calcium. Calcium is also a dispersant, so they kind of work hand in hand here, and both of them also help in a certain way to mitigate acid. They both have a little bit of a higher pH to them, so that helps too. Barium is like a rust and oxidation inhibitor. I don't know why we don't have any barium. Apparently the oil I use does not have any barium in it. Zinc and phosphorus right here kind of work hand in hand. They're both anti-wear additives. So you can see once again, the differences in oils. This first one here had a very strong anti-wear additive package, and then this oil here, much weaker. Here you just got the sample information, lube time, filter change. If you're doing extended drain intervals, this is definitely critical to be sampling. You need to know that you're not doing any damage here. Fuel dilution, okay, right here. I deal with this. I've had some issues. Fuel dilution is going to be, you can have weak injectors. You can have a bad injector that's streaming, or an injector that's not atomizing properly. When you shut the truck off, if you have an injector that's leaking, it can leak fuel into that cylinder and load it up with fuel. When you start it, you should get some white smoke, and a really unpleasant eye-burning smoke. It's really unpleasant to breathe in. Not that any smoke is pleasant, but it's particularly offensive. So fuel dilution will be 99 times out of 100, some kind of injector problem. Oh, if you have a lot of blow by, you can be pushing some fuel into your oil also, if you're letting a lot of compression past your rings. So soot kind of can go hand in hand with fuel dilution. High fuel dilution can cause some soot. Soot is a byproduct of combustion. So as your fuel burns, you make a little bit of soot. Okay. Also, oil degradation can cause soot or a poor quality of oil. The newer oils have much improved soot handling capabilities. So also a lack of air can cause soot. So obviously high soot levels, let's jump up here to silicon. Are we high there? That would mean we have poor airflow, clogged filter, causing high soot. Things go hand in hand here. It's just worth noting and checking. So water is going to be nine times out of 10, if you have water, it's going to be from coolant in your fuel, or coolant in your oil, I'm sorry. It can also be, to a lesser extent, from low operating temperatures, idling, cause a small amount of water, but not typically, and condensation. In the wintertime, the truck sits for a while, you can get some condensation in your engine, and it can get into the oil. Not typically. Most often, if you're going to have water, it's because you got coolant in your oil. Okay. This here, they just measured the viscosity of the oil. You can see here, I've got a drop in viscosity. Well, let's look over here. Fuel dilution. Fuel dilution will cause the viscosity to drop. Also, just wearing out of the oil will cause the viscosity to drop. Viscosity is kind of like one of those things where you got to look and see, okay, what's going on here. Breakdown of the oil. If you have excessive heat in the engine, if you're overheating, you'll break down the viscosity of the oil. Contaminated oil, like I said, with fuel or water, will drop the viscosity. You want to watch your viscosity, because if it drops too low, you can do damage to the engine. You overheat, accelerated wear. You don't want any of that. So keep an eye on your viscosity. I know why mine is down here. It's because of fuel dilution. Okay, that's not a very high percentage of fuel dilution, but it is there nonetheless. So acid number, this is typically measured more in gasoline engines than truck engines. Acid, sometimes it's referred to as a TAN, T-A-N, total acid number. It's from oxidation, depletion of your additive package. Biofuel can cause your acid number to go up. So you want to keep an eye on your acid number if they give you one, but I've never had an oil sample give me an acid number yet. Base number, this is a big one here you want to look at. Base number is, some people think it's a measure of the total, the basic quality of your oil. Kind of it is, but that's not what it means. When they say base, they mean alkaline. So base is another word for alkaline. So it's the total, sometimes it's called a TBN, total base number. Some call it just base number. It is the total alkalinity of your oil. So the higher the number, the better. For some reason, when I use a synthetic oil, it has a lower base number than conventional oil does. I'm not sure why, but it tends to hold its base number better, whereas the conventional will deplete, a little bit at a time. So this is these base numbers, screw it, are a little bit lower than what you got, if you're using conventional oil. This is all synthetic oil here. So base number is measured, it's a volume of potassium hydrochloride, measured in, I don't know if it's milligrams or milliliters, that it takes to neutralize a certain amount of acid. So depletion of the base number, things like excessive blow-by, fuel in your oil, soot, high levels of soot, oxidation causes depletion of the base number. Extreme heat decreases the ability of the oil to neutralize acid, and acid is corrosive and causes wear to metal. So you definitely want to keep an eye on your total base number. Also, when you see the base number drop, right away check your additive package here, because a depleted additive package will cause your total base number to drop also. It's one of the things that can. Okay, so getting towards the end here. Oxidation, extreme heat, like if you have a bearing that's wearing and making like a hot spot, that will cause oxidation. Also, when we talk about excessive heat, that would typically come, well, overheating your engine for one, but then the kind of heat that comes from a component wear, like a bearing, that'll cause oxidation. And we're gonna get a real good example of that in a minute here when I show you this other sample. Fuel contamination will cause oxidation. Oxidation is not a good thing. I'll show you that in a minute. Nitration, right here, okay? It's another thing that's typically more so measured in gas engines. It's a result of the oil mixing with NOx. NOx is nitric oxide. So that comes from blow-by gases, which is more prevalent when you're idling, especially when you're idling and you're not building heat, so you have lower temperatures. Incomplete combustion. All this leads to nitration, and also it can be a result of or cause oil degradation and depletion of your additive package. So that's a kind of basic touching on all these different things they're showing here. There's another one, sulfation, but apparently this one doesn't measure sulfation. So we'll get to that in a minute. Particle count, this just measures if you have any solid particles. Put any comments that they have. Basically, they talk about everything we talked about here. So let's look at this other sample. This is a less expensive sample. They don't give you the TBN. Basically, is the only thing that's missing. But they do give us sulfation. So sulfation would be fuel contamination, excessive idling, low temperature burn. As the TBN drops, also you'll notice the sulfation increase. Not really sure why that happens, but it does. And sulfation will make like a varnish on your parts and cause sludge to form. So just something to keep an eye on. This is from Baldwin Filters. Let's get down to this third oil sample here so we can see what a problem looks like. See all these fancy colors? Definitely got a problem going on here. So here's where oil sample gets to be a science. Okay, what do we got here? We got increased iron, chromium, which we know can be an overlayment metal. Even though they don't have it flagged, we do have a certain amount of aluminum and copper here. Lead is flagged at critically high. Okay, look at these silicon levels, 13, 10. That's way higher than I want to see. Our sodium levels, they're fine. Potassium is fine. Okay, we see a trend here with it's maintaining its additive package in the oil, so that's not an issue. This truck apparently has a long history of fuel dilution, all the way back to December of 18. And the most current is a September of 19. Okay, so this has a long history of fuel dilution that apparently has gone unaddressed. Okay, here it's getting kind of high, 4.6. That could be the cause of this high soot level. Okay, viscosity is held up pretty good considering all this fuel dilution. But here, oxidation, look at this. Okay, always had high oxidation. I know this truck, it doesn't get any idle time. There's an APU on it. So this oxidation, here's what's likely happening. Once you learn this, you're going to know more than the dealer's going to know. They're not going to put all this time into this. So you're your own best advocate for this. This is why you need to know it. And I'd rather have you learn it than just be able to repeat what somebody else said. So it probably all starts with this fuel dilution. Okay, a long history of it causing wear over a certain period of time. These lower numbers here in the green, not so bad. 3.5, is moderate. You get up closer to the 5%, and you're causing, engine wear and undue, problems here. So probably what's happening here is due to this fuel dilution. Okay, we're fuel washing some things, possibly cylinders. Fuel washing is when you get a concentration of fuel in the oil kind of gets washed off by the fuel. Okay, so you got iron, chromium, lead. We're probably fuel washing cylinders and possibly bearings here. I think we have a bad bearing here considering these overlayment metals. Possibly, I'd say probably a main bearing at the least, rod bearings. So fuel dilution causing bearing wear. Okay, bearing wear creates hot spots causing this excessive oxidation. The fuel alone is also causing oxidation, but the hot spots from these bearing wearing spots are also likely contributing to the oxidation. So you kind of have to piece all these things together here when you have a problem, because okay, somebody might say, well, fuel dilution, I'll know if I have fuel dilution, I'll smell it in the oil. No, you won't. Not until you have enough fuel dilution that you already have significant damage in the engine. So this is where oil sampling is critical. You can't smell, taste, or see oxidation. Okay, you can't. These wear metals, you ain't gonna know about any of that unless you're oil sampling. So I know the truck that this came from, and it's going in before there's a catastrophic failure. If we catch it now, we can prevent possibly from some catastrophic failure here, which is coming. Look at the trend of this. This is, 5 oil samples here. Iron's gone up. There's one sample here, this number 24, that came back wonderful, and I don't know what happened there. It's totally illogical for everything to be bad and then all of a sudden be really good, then bad again. So I haven't talked to him to know what happened here, but we definitely have a trend of increasing iron, increasing lead, or definitely a problem with lead, chromium, certain amounts of aluminum and copper. There's small amounts, but they are there. And this oxidation, I'd have been worried about this long ago, because that's the red here is critical. This is one step below critical, and definitely indicates a problem. But this fuel dilution should have been addressed a very long time ago. Now if we go down here, they just give some comments of, from the oil sampling company of what they think this could be. I hope that that helps, and you'll be well on your way to knowing, you'll be better at, if you remember all this, you'll be better at interpreting this thing than anybody at the dealer. They're not going to advocate for you. They're just going to change parts.